right, everybody. Welcome back to Hardpoints, a podcast about energy security and the startup economy, how they intersect to shape the world around us. As always, I'm joined by my buddy Neal, and we're here each week to unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and why it matters to you. My name's Mike Smith. Thanks for being here. Neal, how was your weekend?
I work most of the weekend. The good news is that I have a investor who has stepped forward to lead. That unlocks the rest of the round, which is now coming together, which is great. But yeah, I basically worked all weekend. How was your weekend?
I think a little bit better than that. Actually, no, you have good news. So, having an investor come forward that's willing to lead around is so essential. For those that aren't in the startup world, there's a lot of incentive for investors to be the last dollar into the round, not the first, because it means that things feel risky. If you put your name out there, you're just kind of waiting for this. So there's a lot of people that just kind of hang around the hoop, hoping for a rebound, looking for that. And they're good, they need to do what they need to do. But as a startup, you're always looking for that lead investor, the one that has the conviction that's going to bring everybody to the party, and frankly, get all those little sucker fish to only join the party if they have something to add. And so,
well, in our case, it was even bigger, a bigger deal for us because, and this is a good and bad thing. When we went out for this round, which is an interim round based on very specific dynamics going on in our company right now, which are good also, which is we have a customer that wants to buy the power we're producing. We can't physically sell them the power. So we went out to raise a little bit of money to be able to do that, to get that commercial traction, which is what everybody wants us to do, what we want to do. So we went out, we announced the round, and immediately all of our insiders came forward and said, yes, we're in. We're going to give you, 80% of the capital was committed on day one. But then I had to go out and find somebody to price it and to lead it, to what you said. It was a little bit backwards, which is why having this lead is so critical, is because I couldn't bring in the insiders, that 80% of the round, until I found a lead. So my task has been to go find a lead, which again, I'll happily give up the weekend if it means that this fundraising thing will be over, because it's awful.
Yeah, little stitch in time there, something to just get it done with. How much runway does this give you for off of this round?
Yeah, it's another 18 months, which is great. It's we actually intended for it to not be a full financing, but because it comes with some government matching money, it'll end up being another 18 months. So we raised 24 months. We're about 15 months into that. So we're a little less than a year away from what would have been the end of our runway, but now we sort of reset the clock.
That's awesome. New lease on life, keep moving forward, kind of get through the current tumult of a lot of the stuff that's happening in the energy space. That's probably pretty huge.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. As a company who's building, we call it now rail energy, but we make energy from air molecules that move around the globe. Call it whatever you want, but the administration is now
normal, insane people would refer to that as wind. I have for millennia.
Yes. The administration has declared a all administration wide effort. I'm not sure how they call it. Actually, I forget exactly, but it's like an administration wide effort against wind. This is Department of the Energy, of course, Department of Interior, et cetera, et cetera. It's all everything that could be used to take down wind projects. It's happening. So look, we're different, and we're trying to highlight how we're different. We don't look like a traditional wind turbine. We're shorter. We're less obtrusive. We're also sourcing American materials and making in America, and we're helping AI data centers, AI hyperscalers win the AI race. Right? We got to beat China. You can't do that without a lot of energy. We can help them do that. Anyway, all of that is to say yes, there is a lot of tumult in my world right now.
Yeah, just to give it an example of that, the administration canceled a almost complete offshore wind installation project off of Connecticut and Rhode Island. $4 billion invested in the project. It was something like 85% complete. So the only thing they had done that was short of was finishing the permitting and turning on the switch, and they canceled it. A lot of speculation why. Some people think it's just because Trump doesn't like the way that wind towers look. Other people think it's a little bit more nefarious or, associated with, fossil fuel preservation of market share. Either way, the administration is pretty hostile to wind as kind of as a concept broadly.
Yeah, let me double click on what you just said. I think the end result is what it is. Why we got here is sort of irrelevant, but I think it's pretty clear. As somebody who lives in this world, to me, it's pretty clear that there was a wind turbine built off the coast of Scotland where Trump has a golf course, and I think he's got some pretty legit evidence that wind turbine devalued his investment. And so he's pissed. And I get it. I also think that the response is a little nonsensical. I understand the emotion, but let me go a different direction here and just say, like, if you look at the goals of the administration from an quote unquote energy dominance perspective, I agree with almost all of it. Like, we need to have energy security. We need to have energy independence. We need to therefore fund our energy industries and break down barriers to building stuff. All of that is true. But then when you look at what their policy is actually doing, that's why I say nonsensical, because they're cutting off the fastest growing lowest cost sources of energy in the process. Like, let's do what you say you want to do. I'll get on board with that and I will support every bit of that. But let's make logical decisions, people.
Yeah, it reminds me of a little bit about Joe Biden when he was a senator, kind of in the pre-Obama day, before he was VP Biden, even let alone President Biden. One of his famous sayings was, "Don't tell me what you believe, show me your budget."
Yeah,
and it's kind of the same idea, which is, show me what you really believe, and if you really believe in something, you're going to resource it and put product, and decisions behind it. And if otherwise, you're just kind of full of shit. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, which is the energy policy. That's being said in public is really just a snow job for something else. And so
all right, but seriously, how was your weekend? Seriously,
but back to your yeah, it was kind of weird. So having a little bit of staff turnover here, internal to acclimate, so having to kind of deal with some of that. Really good people that are kind of going on to different paths, and so. Wish them all the success in the world. Incredibly thankful for their service to the company. I'm glad that they still kind of believe in what we're doing. Not going to dive into any more than that, just out of respect for privacy there. But like that causes a little bit of stress for a small company when you have staff turnover of one or two bodies makes a large percentage of a small company. Yeah, so dealing a little bit with that, and then the other thing is that my son had a scout campout this weekend, which he's a first year scout or a tenderfoot. Actually, I think he promoted to something. I can't remember what, but so they have this program for taking the early scouts to get them through the first several ranks, so they kind of develop those skills and the confidence in order to ultimately on a path towards becoming an Eagle Scout. And so one of them that you have to do, you have like a couple of these weekends where you have to do a camp out. And so my son, the big thing that he had to do this weekend was cook food in a kind of a camping scenario. And, he cooks at home. He'll make pancakes or something like that. So it's not, I didn't think it'd be all that cosmic, but he was allowed to plan his own meals. And he's got this fascination with the Japanese things right now. So he decided that we were going to make sushi. Which is not exactly like camping food. So tried to kind of work all that. Obviously, I wasn't going to have raw fish in a cooler. So we did kind of like a vegetarian sushi. But then on Friday afternoon, he was walking home and he apparently got like stung by a bee on the hand. Whatever, like it's life. He didn't tell anybody about it. Because again, it's like, I guess not that big of a deal. And he woke up in the morning and his hand was like swollen up like a balloon. So I was like, and then he was saying like, I feel weird. I'm having a hard time breathing. And I was like, uh-oh. But I was like, man, that's kind of a delay. So anyways, so like the whole camp out got delayed because we ended up having to take him to urgent care. Turns out it was just, a localized allergic reaction. But man, that just put that kid into a bucket the whole weekend. And so like here I am cooking, like making sushi for this kid who's like not really focused on what's going on there. And it just felt like a kind of a weekend of like trying to be a good parent and just mostly not. And yeah, so it wasn't the most fun weekend for me.
No. Doing okay now?
Oh, he's fine. It's like one of those things too, like, um, you want to build like a little bit of resilience into a kid, right? But there's also this component of like, I've come to realize that because I live in an urban environment, that he's pretty savvy about certain things. Walking, around, fairly urban neighborhoods, he's pretty safe and smart about all that. But there's other things that, like, if he'd had a little bit more of a rural experience, he would be a little bit tougher about, and he would have, spoken up a little bit about sooner. That hand was swelling and kind of bothering him that the evening before. If we'd seen that, my wife's a doctor. I wouldn't have had to go to urgent care. She could have just looked at it and then we could have done something totally different. So there's just like some things there. And then also like, it's painful when it's all swollen like that, but also like that's life, man. Like you got to sometimes kind of work through the pain a little bit. And that just really seemed to kind of derail him a little bit. So we're going to have to figure out a way to kind of toughen him up without, abusing him. So, which is always, which just means putting him into scenarios where he's going to, potentially fall and hurt himself a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my line with my boys is always my number one job is to keep you safe. That includes keeping you from permanently damaging yourself. And I use that word permanently I actually had this conversation with my 11-year-old this weekend. It's like, you're going to get hurt. I guess this is your point. Like there's lessons in that. That's character building, right? But also like, am I going to keep you from getting run over by a car? Yes, that I'm going to stop that, but I'm going to let you trip and fall so that you can figure out resilience and getting yourself back, picking yourself back up. And to that end, this has been a conversation with my wife over the last several weeks. There's a skate park, I don't know, 3 miles from the house. And my boy's got a scooter and he wants to ride a scooter to the skate park. I'm like, yep, good to go.
Go get him.
Yeah, like, let's do it, man. You're 11, man. Go explore some. And my wife was like, hold on, wait a minute. So we worked it out and he went. We sort of took him the first time, but now he's off on his own and he's going to the skate park by himself. Like, hey, man, like, get out there and get after it.
Yeah, 100%. You also have these abilities to like, to follow your children a little bit more with like smartwatches and things like that now. So like you can also like know where they're at. They have the ability to call you. I remember looking at it like like a map of it was a study that was and the results of the study was they tried to look at multiple generations as far as that had all lived in one area and how far they had all traveled. And like there was the grandfather and the father, excuse me, there was a mother and her son, and then the mother's father and her grandfather. And so, like the eldest generation in that case, he'd go like 8 miles to go to a fishing hole, and that was like a fairly routine thing for him when he was like 10 to just go walking off into the woods to go to a fishing hole. And then, every generation it got a little bit more constricted down to the boy that was, now 10 was limited to something like a 2-block radius. And you're just like, man, so that's one of the things like I'm proud of for my son is that like, yeah, he can walk over, it's a fairly urban environment. There's, streets with stoplights that he has to cross. And he does fine with those. When he was going to a different school, he would walk home or walk over to my office after school. And, a lot of people kind of consider this a little bit of a rough area. And that's why the rent's so cheap for my little startup. And so there was no gang activity or anything like that. But, homeless people on this, around. And yeah, he's less afraid of homeless people than, most suburbanite white, middle-aged men are. But the bee sting put him over, man. So it's kind of like, all right, let's figure out how to kind of get this rebalanced. Well, speaking of balance, and getting things that are way out of balance, let's talk about what's going on in the news, man. You want to talk about what was the meme that I saw there? Chapocalypse now. Did you see this?
No, what?
It's like some AI generated image that Trump retweeted or retruthed or whatever the hell he does.
Yeah.
It was a picture of him looking like the cover from Apocalypse Now, with the cavalry officer's hat, and then like in the background it's actually Chicago, and he's talking about like invading Chicago with the Department of War. So yeah, apparently that's what the U.S. president does now, is he's declaring war on American cities, or at least in meme format, which I guess is funny to somebody, but it ain't me. What do you think about all that, man?
Well, I'm gonna start with, I don't worry about his memes. I think he likes to troll. He's like the troller in chief, and I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna go back to, what was that line from Biden? Show me your budget line. Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget. I mean, look, the proof is when he's done. Um, as somebody who's studied insurgencies, and I studied them so that I could be a more effective warrior in Iraq, because we were a counterinsurgency force. What I studied along with that is that insurgencies often are led by future authoritarians. Future authoritarians, think of like Fidel Castro in Cuba, think of Mao Zedong in China. These are historical figures who ultimately end up seizing power. And it really, like seeing the National Guard in DC got me sort of thinking about sort of what is the authoritarian playbook. And so I spent some time with ChatGPT, and I went back and looked at some of I actually kept some of the manuals, like the Che Guevara, like his journals and published articles and writings. I mean, it is uncanny. Memes aside, it is uncanny to me just how, like, just go down the playbook, and I'll just list a few of them off, like undermining democratic norms, control and manipulation of information, polarizing and scapegoating, weakening the rule of law, building a cult of personality, and exploiting a crisis. Like, you can go down this list, those are the top 6 things that are sort of, quote unquote, the authoritarian playbook. Like, if I was like intuitively freaked out before, now I'm really freaked out.
Just to circle back on the meme sort of thing, which is that building a cult of personality, and then polarization, which are steps 3 and 5 in what they think they're like.
Yeah.
Part of me has always been like super, super frustrated with all the little like gotcha games that people on the right play fairly often, like the OK sign as being, symbol of white power, et cetera, like that. They say it doesn't really mean that, but then they flash it like at the Kavanaugh hearings and a couple of these other things. And they're doing it mostly just to get people concerned about it. But then what it ends up doing is desensitizing us all to the idea that like this is normal versus not normal. Like any serious person that is trolling in a congressional hearing needs to be thrown the fuck out of government and never allowed back into the building. Like they're not serious enough to do the will of the people. Whatever your political preference is like you shouldn't be trolling as a means of governing. And so there's that. But yeah, I think we are definitely in a place now where we are trying to normalize the idea of having the military deployed in the United States. It's happened in Los Angeles, both in the form of the National Guard and the U.S. Marine Corps. We talked about that before. It's happened in D.C., a little bit of a carve out here because D.C. is federal property technically, even though it has a lot of home rule kind of de facto state sort of functions. But the deployment of the National Guard, if it goes into Chicago or wherever else, it should be pointed out now is explicitly now an illegal order. It was an illegal order when it happened in California, but the courts hadn't ruled on it. But the courts have now ruled on it and said this is an illegal order. And so we're now in this territory where American servicemen and women are not only morally, but constitutionally required to disobey this. Like you and I know as former military officers, retired military officers, that you are required to disobey an illegal order. And too many times in our history, people haven't, and it's gone to really bad places. And so I'm just not seeing a whole lot of people going down that road right now. Like, I don't understand why, leaders of the National Guard are not speaking up about this.
Yeah, they would first have to know. And I think, look, I was never trained on any kind of domestic scenario. I got all sorts of training on collateral damage from dropping bombs in a wartime overseas. I never got any. I wonder if today's military has talked about this, really tried to educate themselves on what is constitutional and what's not. What is this a legal order or not? And who's supposed to tell the generals that would sign the deployment orders for the National Guard? Who's in that seat to interpret what's legal and illegal? Because I mean, you can't put that on like a corporal or even a lieutenant.
I mean, you sure as hell can. Like, you're actually like, every member of the chain of command is required to disobey illegal orders. And so,
yeah, but I guess my point is, like, if you know it's an illegal order, how does the lieutenant know it's illegal?
yeah, so absolutely, the generals and the colonels have the most culpability associated with this, because they're the ones that have judge advocate generals that are available. Judge advocates general, I think, would be actually the way you'd pluralize that. They're the one that have JAGs that are available to kind of, which are military lawyers, to advise them about like what's going on, et cetera. But who should know about this is the U.S. National Guard, right? Like, because the National Guard has a state component, has different legal authorities depending upon like what function it's operating in. They have like this training associated with it, and the person that says it's illegal ultimately is the U.S. judicial branch, and the U.S. judicial branch, a federal judge, has spoken and said this is illegal. Like, it seems pretty fucking unambiguous to me at this point, right?
Well, but then let's go back to that list again, right? Number one on the list was undermining democratic norms and institutions. So one of the things that happened that was undermining the norms was the J6 pardons. These, I don't know how many millions of dollars we spent trying
These criminals,
the 1,500 or so folks who, it was an insurrection. I mean, I know people like, oh, they were rioters, they got caught up, whatever. It was an insurrection. It was an attempt, whether Joe Schmo, who was stuck in the middle of the crowd, intended to or not. Those 1,500 people, the intent of that activity was to disrupt the transfer of power, peaceful transfer of power. It was an insurrection. So now we've got those folks, those 1,500 folks who have not been held to the norms of our institutions, specifically that the legislative branch spoke and the executive branch overturned it. You've also got other norms violated, like, the Congress basically doesn't do anything, as far as I'm aware, to stand up against the president, what he wants. Even if they passed a budget before, they'll go back and rewrite it because he's asked them to. So the reason I'm bringing this up now is that, like, yes, the judicial branch has spoken, but how do you? I don't know. I'm stuck on the implementation here. Like, the lieutenant who is aware of that court case, but like there's a bunch of stuff happening there where norms have been challenged, and there's a lot of muddiness and gray area. And also, if he or she happens to watch Newsmax, and they're getting some misinformation about the actual legality of what they're being asked to do. I don't know how that's a really tough spot to be in if you're that lieutenant.
Yep, I will agree to that. I also don't care. Like, that's the oath. You took the oath, right? And like, the time for like half measures and moral compromise has passed. We have a president who is actively, insinuating war upon American cities, deploying military people against the law into these states. This is where it's going to have to happen. And if you have fealty amongst the highest political ranks, which generals and flag officers are, because of like that. There is definitely that component to it. Frankly, the only person that's going to stop it are the lieutenants, captains, and majors that say, "No, I'm not doing this anymore." Frankly, they have the most to lose. The general that stood up and said, "I'm not going to do this anymore," and got fired and got a retirement pay, and ended up getting put onto a board of the Carlyle Group, like for their leadership, like they got almost nothing to lose. Like they actually would be seen as a leader. But like the lieutenant that says, "I'm not doing this anymore," and is going to have the weight of the president of the United States and all of his cronies coming down on top of him, that person actually has a ton to lose. But
So that's that. Yeah, that's where I was going to go next, though, is that this administration has been very clear about sending messages. More general officers being fired. Another tranche were fired just over the last 10 days or so. This is permeated everywhere. So another, the next on the list was control and manipulation of information. So there've been ABC and CBS have agreed to pay pretty good sums of money just to get out of jail free, right? Just to sort of, that's the wrong phrase, but like just to avoid the wrath of the administration. The law firms, also that were sued, just settled out of just fear. And I put the generals in the same spot. You got an administration who's willing to come after people if they're not sufficiently loyal or have some sort of disagreement, which, by the way, that disagreement is a healthy part of democracy, even within the military ranks, but they're squashing all of that. So now you got people running for their lives. And, I take your point, but this is, if the generals aren't willing to stand up against that sort of intimidation, what's a lieutenant to do?
stand up. Like, I mean, the lieutenant is to stand up. Just because the general is a coward doesn't mean that the lieutenant should be too. Yeah, you've got to stand up. This is a time to be counted, in my opinion, especially if you are in a position to act like an invading force in the United States. And, it might be mitigated a little bit if he decides he's not going to go after Chicago and is deciding going to deploy to New Orleans because he's got a friendly governor and a Republican governor in Louisiana. That's a little bit better, because it now actually has the guise of being legal, but it's still immoral. But in a clear illegal order, you have a duty to say no. You have a duty to publicly speak against it and or resign your commission. And anybody that's listening to this in that position, that's what I would hope you would do. That's what I hope I would do if I were in that situation. I'm a little older, a little wiser, maybe a little grumpier. But
you're definitely grumpier.
Yeah, definitely grumpier. But I'd like to believe that that's what I would do too. I've just been sitting here and watching this, and your time has come.
Yeah. All right. So I think I don't disagree. I'm just pointing out that there's practical implications here that are, by design, our media sources are muddled. I don't think it's going to be super clear to the lieutenant what's legal and illegal. And if it's clear, that's a hard enough choice. I think what's going to be harder here is that it's going to be muddied. Anyway, bullet point number 3, after undermining democratic norms, control and manipulation of information, is polarization and scapegoating. This is the one that caught my attention first, actually, think Golden Escalator 2015. The examples of this are, when Mexico sends us their people, they're not sending their best comment, they're rapists, etc. And I assume some are good people. That was the moment I was like, whoa, that's a total authoritarian kind of thing to say. Again, intuitively, but now you build that up. I mean, over the last 10 years, yes, it's about immigrants. It's also this, I didn't put this together until recently. All this fighting of DEI is also a bunch of scapegoating and just polarization to put an us versus them, to create a mentality so that, there is somebody to target, minority group in particular to target.
Yeah, it's it was the campaign slogan for Trump in the 24 election, which is the Democrats care about they, them, I care about you. Same sort of thing. How do you demonize and scapegoat trans people? I have trans friends. They're doing nothing other than trying to live their lives and are not doing any harm to any of us. How do you demonize them? How do you demonize people that don't think the cops should be killing black people without at least some sort of justice that comes from the inappropriate use of force? How do you demonize people that are gay? Gay marriage is definitely back on the block here. How do you demonize the powerless in the form of immigrants that are in this society right now? One of the Afghan families that I am sponsoring, they never got a green card because they just weren't in that status because they escaped just prior to the fall of Kabul rather than after it. They're now facing a deportation hearing. So, and to be clear, this family is in the United States because they helped American servicemen in Afghanistan during the war on Afghanistan. If they go back, it is a danger to their lives. What the fuck are we doing? And they didn't do anything to hurt you. They've done a lot to help you. So, yeah, they're definitely scapegoating everybody that is not like rural white people, I guess, rural white, Republican voters. I'm not sure what it is, but they've picked a war on cities, on brown people, on immigrants, on gay people. All of them are the other. And it's only if you kind of look like me but don't happen to live in Denver. If I lived in Birmingham instead of Denver, then they would be all about me. But they're not.
Yep. Yeah, I actually I have an Afghan family as well. An individual who's a student was here on an asylum claim because his dad built stuff for Americans in Afghanistan. Just turned 21 and therefore had to go apply for his own asylum. Went to the court to go update his claim just as he's supposed to do and got pulled. And then after 19 hours of being dragged around in handcuffs, 6 different places, is now in Texas somewhere. And, this is a kid who's trying to do the right thing. I don't know, all sorts of insanity.
Yeah.
And for what? What? You got to ask yourself why. What is? I get that we want to be a nation of laws and secure borders. I got that, but also that, can we be humane in the process?
I mean, humane should be the base level. If you can't be humane, then it's not a process I'm willing to engage in.
Yeah. All right. So that was point number 3. Sorry, we'll keep moving. Point number 4 was weakening the rule of law. And here, there have been so many executive orders. Every president does executive orders. I get it. It's actually kind of crazy because executive orders can just be undone when a new president comes in. But these executive orders oftentimes are just challenges to the legal system, and in some cases are just outright illegal, but they can exist for a period of time until they get adjudicated. So the rule of law here has been targeted. The most clear example is no kidding, on day one, basically overturning the birthright citizenship, literally in the 14th Amendment, that if you're born here, an American citizen, and one of the executive orders just says, nope, we're ignoring that. You're not actually an American citizen. Now that got stayed and it's working its way through the courts for a number of other reasons, but that's insanity. Just outright blatant saying that the 14th Amendment is not what it actually says.
Yeah, another way that you can weaken the rule of law is just frankly to overwhelm the legal system. And so every time somebody gets snatched off the street by ICE, that is illegal, that has to go through a court proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time for judges. You underfund the judges and the lawyers. Matter of fact, you don't grant these people a whole lot of access to lawyers anyways, as we were seeing in a lot of these cases. lawyers even being able to get access to their clients is becoming difficult. Alligator Alcatraz, for example, just didn't allow people to talk to their lawyers, which is, again, kind of definitional concentration camp sort of stuff.
Or just lack of due process. How about all the people that actually now this has been clearly stated by the courts that everybody, including somebody who's suspected under the Alien Enemies Act and is a suspected gang member, should get at least some ability to answer or like to defend themselves. But holy crap, for months and months and months, they were pulling people off the streets without due process and sending them to faraway places outside of America where no lawyer can touch them.
That's right. Well, they're still doing stuff like this. And as long as they keep jamming up the courts with all their stuff, like kind of reminds me, we've had a little bit of a history of this, before with Andrew Jackson, saying like, cool that the Supreme Court made that ruling. Now, good luck having them enforce it. It's the same idea here is that if you overwhelm the court system and you just keep doing whatever the hell you want to do, and nobody says this is illegal, I'm going to stop because I have a duty to the fucking Constitution, then it just keeps happening. Like that's somebody, the only thing that is literally, I'm tired of the hashtag resistance, like the, wearing, pink pussy hats and thinking that like if I march and shout in my city where, everybody agrees with you, like I'm tired of that. I want to see actual resistance. I want to see people that are going to stop complying with blatantly illegal and unconstitutional activities.
Yeah. All right. The other weakening of rule of law is the questioning of the elections, which Trump did for 4 years until we had another election when he won. And then all of a sudden that election was fine. So I don't know how anybody can look at that and be comfortable with it. I was always uncomfortable. People have reasonable like suspicions about how things work and should dig under the hood every time they've done it. In fact, in Trump's first term, he actually funded a whole commission on finding out like what was wrong with, and then they didn't find anything. And then of course, quietly they go away. But this is the kind of thing where you just undermine people's faith in the law. And then when you break it, then it becomes not so serious because, well, everybody's breaking it. Everybody's.
Yeah.
All right, number 5.
The other thing, before we go on to that, I think about the weakening of the elections is moving forward too. So it's not just like what we've done in the past. Now he's starting to kind of actively like criticize the idea of a lot of ways that elections happen now. So, being a Coloradoan, one of the things he's gone after here, he explicitly tied it to this, by the way, is that he moved the command for U.S. Space Force from Colorado to Alabama. And very explicitly on Truth Social, Trump said that he was doing that because he questioned Colorado's mail-in ballot process. So one of the things that you can do here in Colorado, and it's great and it's super secure, is you can mail in your ballot. It gets mailed to you. We have pretty high voting rates as a result. Something like 90% of Republicans in the Colorado, for example, voted by mail-in ballot last election cycle. I want to point out, I've never voted in person in my entire life. Like, is every ballot that I've ever cast invalid? And the reason for that is because I spent, the first 16 years of my voting life in the United States military stationed away from Idaho, and I had to vote by mail-in ballot. This is a practice that goes back to the American Civil War. And so are you saying that every single vote that I've ever had in my life is illegitimate? That American military, are we going to start granting them leave in order to be able to go home to vote in elections? Are we talking about disenfranchising people that are willing to die for this country because it is politically expedient for that asshole? Again, I want to see people speaking up for this. The U.S. military, its leaders should be speaking up and saying, this is an important thing for the U.S. military.
Yeah.
They should be talking about that. But right now, we're allowing this in order to delegitimize both the integrity of elections and also as an excuse to move federal projects away from quote unquote blue states to red states, which is the most gross political patronage system I could think of.
All right, moving on to number 5. That was again, reviewing the list, this is undermining democratic norms, control and manipulation of information, polarizing and scapegoating, weakening the rule of law. Number 5 is building cult of personality. This is like Mao's personality cult in China, Perón in Argentina, Marcos in the Philippines. It is centralizing power around a single person and demanding personal loyalty. So I don't even think we have to explain that one.
I mean, I would just roll a video of a cabinet meeting right now. Have you seen those things?
Oh my gosh. Well, and the tech bros did it last week too. Did you see that? I vomited. I threw up in my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, it highlights, again, a little bit of cowardice here. Mark Zuckerberg, who has like fuck you money, can literally say to this guy, fuck you. And, could live anywhere in the world. And I'm sure people would be, Luxembourg would be happy to have Facebook, domiciled in there.
Yeah.
He just lied to the president. We got caught on video on a hot mic saying, yeah, we're investing in the United States. And that's all because of you, glorious Trump. And then, on the hot mic, he goes, yeah, we're not really investing in it, whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's
totally.
How can you kiss the ring in order to kind of build that cult of personality?
All right. Number 6 is exploiting crisis, real or manufactured. This is like, dude, and I'll say this, I probably should have led with this, but let me say, I am really trying not to be an alarmist in all of this. I try to look at this because I talk to a lot of folks who are very much on the Trump train and some that are actually in the administration and some that are just lifelong Republicans who didn't vote for him the first time, but have come on board since. And what I always get is like, it's some version of Trump derangement syndrome. So I really do. I make a good faith effort to understand like, oh, well, but he's really just trying to secure the border. And he really is just trying to end the war in Ukraine. He really is just trying to make Harvard more fair and equitable, et cetera, et cetera. But then you look at this list and you look at what like Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines. To your point about the National Guard, we're not that far from that. I think we're like a breath or two away from martial law here. Because what you just described, and let me connect some dots here. I am trying to be an advocate for the lieutenant here and saying like, that's going to be hard, dude. How do you know what's real and not? How do you know what's legal and not, especially given the fractured media ecosystem? Then you're going to have, if this gets forced, if Chicago gets forced and the mayor's saying no and the governor's saying no, and it's truly an illegal order and you've got defections in the military, that in itself is probably a cover enough, an emergency enough to declare martial law. So, I just, again, I'll go back. I'm not trying to be alarmist here, but there is a pathway here where like, it's almost, to say it more cynically, like it's almost like they're trying to create the conditions where you put people in a quandary and you pick people, you force them to make some really hard choices. And that creates chaos, God forbid, some sort of violence. Just give them a reason, right? That's, I'm reminded of this like moving quote, like, yeah, man, just give me a reason. But they're creating conditions with which you could reasonably expect martial law was the only rational response.
I mean, I'll put this question to you and anybody that's listening. Do you think he's going to accept the results of the 2026 election?
I think he's going to run again.
Yeah, but I mean, why wait till 2028? Do you think he's even going to accept the results of the 2026 election?
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I've been thinking about 28. I haven't given 26 enough thought. I think as it's not him, it's going to be harder for him to not accept those results. I think maybe you should just explain, but maybe what you're saying is like, if the Republicans are voted out in the House, he'll just throw those election results out. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. You're going to criticize mail-in balloting, say that it was a stolen election and, 14 seats in California. I mean, he's already doing all the things he would need to do in order to set that up. And he's also normalizing the use of military force internal to the United States. Maybe do you think he even allows the election to happen without National Guard troops at polling stations?
Yeah. Yes, I do, because there's too many polling stations. But I do. Let me take this in a slightly different direction. The scenarios that I've come up with here are that he, if you take the birthright of citizenship decision that was handed down, which they haven't actually decided that case on the merits, by the way, which is, I think, interesting in itself. But the Supreme Court ruled that region. I'm going to not get the legal terms right here, but the legal stays, like a judge of the district court in Washington, in Oregon, couldn't make a decision that has a nationwide implication. So that judge has to issue a ruling that's only in their district. Only the Supreme Court can do a nationwide injunction or stay or whatever the right legal term is there. They have not, again, I'll say they have not issued a ruling on the merits, meaning like whether or not the 14th Amendment actually says you're a citizen if you're born here, which it clearly does, but they've not actually made a ruling.
And let's be clear, in this specific case, the U.S. The Supreme Court hasn't, but in hundreds of previous Supreme Court cases, they have ruled that the 14th Amendment very explicitly says that if you're born in America, you are an American. Thanks for playing.
Yes.
Like you have citizenship. So anything of that would be a massive overturning of both the plain language of the 14th Amendment and fucking a century and a half's worth of case law, right? Like there's a lot going on there.
Also, just believe your own eyes. Like, go read the 14th Amendment. It's not vague. It's actually the clearest part of the Constitution. Maybe the clearest line in the Constitution is. Anyway, I digress. I think the point here is like what the Supreme Court has done is set up a scenario in which if that election nightmare comes to fruition, there isn't a regional district court that's going to be able to stop anything. It's going to have to come to the Supreme Court, which is a little bit odd because now you're going to, you want a showdown? Like, is it John Roberts and this very conservative court really going to stand up to Trump? I don't know. Part of me wants to believe that they will, but they've certainly been pretty friendly to him so far.
John Roberts has absolutely no indication that he's ever done anything of courage on this. Very specifically, he's had opportunities to. The Supreme Court has tried to avoid being involved in politics. So in gerrymandering cases, for example, district assertions, and they have like bent over backwards and then bent over backwards again in order to avoid operating and trying to work on this. And they're saying it's all a political sort of thing. But it's a very clear sort of scenario here, which is that authoritarian regimes often come into power through democratic means, and one of the ways that they usually do that is instead of letting the voters select the people, they have select the leaders. They have the leaders select the voters that are going to be voting for them. And so there is no political recourse if you can gerrymander out, your way into permanent power there. And there is a home field advantage within the Constitution for rural white American voters associated with the Electoral College and associated with the Senate. And if you can gerrymander out the U.S. House, which increasingly we're seeing people try to do in Texas, no other state in the entire country has ever redistricted between censuses other than Texas. And now they're trying to do it twice, and both times it's been to do something like this. So again, back to my original question, do you think he's actually going to, if it's, as all indications kind of show it is, based on, public polling, et cetera, do you think he's even going to accept the 2026 election if it gives the House to Democrats and the ability, theoretically, to do investigations, subpoenas, to have budget standoffs?
I think he's going to do what he did in 2020, which is raise objection and call it a hoax and all of the things. The question is whether or not the institutions are there to prevent his delusion from becoming reality.
And what's the answer to that question?
Well, I think that's a big what if. One, Congress keeps saying that they haven't given up their power. They've shown no indication that they're going to stand up to him, but at least the leadership has said we're opposing him on key things. I think the Congress has to stand up there. Second is the courts. I think the Supreme Court in particular has put itself in a position. This was my previous point. It's like they put themselves very squarely as the only court that can really counterbalance the executive. Now, and Roberts has had a long view that the executive powers should be expanded, and he's sort of ideologically pursued that vision. So some of this you could point to some of it and say, well, he's just being ideologically consistent. But to answer your question, no, I think pretty predictably, if the Republicans lose, Trump will object. He'll call it a fake election, et cetera, et cetera.
Refuse to seat. Yeah, the House will refuse to seat the new members.
Well, this is the question. This is where I am. It's like my buddy in the administration says, no, the institutions will hold. We weren't that close in January 6th. There's lots of institutional fortitude left in the tank. We're going to be okay. And so I don't know. Sometimes, I look at this list that we just went through and it scares the shit out of me. But then I hear guys like that and they come back at me like, nah, we're fine. This is Trump just being Trump, and he's flexing his muscle, but he's going to leave in 2028 and there's nothing to worry about here. I don't know. Here's the list that I've sort of been crafting in my head for my buddies that are like, so you're good with this, trying to end birthright citizenship, pardoning 1,500 insurrectionists, mobilizing the military on U.S. soil. Holy shit. Using tariffs, not for their stated purpose, I guess, whatever, but as personal leverage, like just a way to increase the power of the executive.
It's worth pointing out, U.S. manufacturing has gone down 6 months straight. So
yeah, it's not working, but that's beside the point. It's just like, it centralizes power in the executive is what it does.
That's right.
Suing the shit out of the media and intimidating them, suing the crap out of law firms who might oppose you, withholding funding that has nothing to do with your objections against universities, masked men leading ICE raids on grandma. Like, oh, here's another sidebar, but like, I just had another buddy of mine. He's like, oh man, they just snapped up the folks at the dry cleaners. And it was just like two little old ladies running the dry cleaners. I can't believe they did that. I'm like, fuck, man. I'm like, what?
Do you think?
Like, you can't, what do you mean you can't believe they did that? Anyway. And then lastly, and this is way under the radar, but like all the grift with the crypto and the self-dealing and the bribes, like you're good with all that stuff, right? Like, okay, just so we know where we stand. Like I've tried to be generous to this administration on the good shit they've done with defense, closing the border. Like I think a lot of the pendulum stuff swung too far to the left, and I'm happy to see it come back to the center. But holy fuck, man, this is a long list. That's 9 things that are just like none of it's American. It's all authoritarian playbook bullshit.
Yeah. To answer my own question, I am quite convinced he will not accept the results of the 26th election. We have plenty of track record to show that's going to be the case. I am quite convinced that the institutions will not hold because we are not seeing them hold now on many issues that are already blatant, as we've talked about, like blatantly illegal, unconstitutional. People are being snatched off the fucking street. American citizens having their rights taken away from them. No checks are being put upon the people that are doing that. No consequences for the people that are ordering it. So I have zero confidence in the institutions. I might have about 10 years ago, 5 years ago even. But I knew that if we voted Trump in 2024, this is where we were going. And so for me, the only 2 things that I see stopping this fucking train from, continuing to careen down, the authoritarian tracks is either God gets a vote here and puts us all out of our collective problem, The old man is not particularly healthy, has never taken care of himself. Or individuals stand up. I just don't see anything different. And we're approaching the point where authoritarian institutions very rarely end without violence, right? And so I'm not advocating for that, but I'm also starting to see us getting pretty backed into a corner here, which is where if you've subverted the ability of democracy in order to allow, you know, the world to evolve and to kind of adapt to the problems of the people, you start putting into a corner where the only thing that's available is not evolution, but revolution. And I am afraid for my country. I don't want that. But I'm also not seeing any of the individuals that could stand up with moral clarity, from that, you know, metaphorical lieutenant up to the metaphorical general. I'm not seeing any of them actually standing up. And so, you know, I'm not exactly praying to God that the guy dies, but I'm praying to God that he, you know, he helps us out of this jam right now, because we're in a jam.
Yeah. Well, we should move on to GBOs, but I will add one final like tidbit. I raise some money sometimes from foundations, and you know we're in a bad place when foundations are afraid of the wrath of the administration. Like just what they do with their private dollars to fund civil society kind of projects, feeding hungry people and community engagement and stuff like that. I actually had a donor essentially say like, "Oh, we can't fund stuff that's possibly going to upset the administration." You know, there's a terror campaign going on in corporate America, in the government, and now in these nonprofit, just like do-gooders. Holy, that was a wake-up call to me.
Yeah, and again, a lot of these foundations are funded by very, very wealthy people that have fuck you money. Like, why aren't they? You know, like they have the money and the resources to be like, you know what, fuck you. Like, we're going to stand up for the right thing. And the flip of like jamming the court system full of shit is jamming up the institutions that are trying to do evil. In my opinion, I think that it's a fairly non-controversial thing to say. It is pretty evil what we're doing here when we're snatching people and making people afraid for speaking and doing all these things. If you're not willing to stand up for evil when you got fuck you money, like, what are you doing? Why do you even have fuck you money? You're, you know, like, you're a coward. So, anyways, sorry to be a little bit of a broken record there, but like, I'm just, I think it's just time for people to stand up straight, you know, put their shoulders back and say with their whole fucking chest, it stops with me.
Yeah, I think that's just hasn't been a lot of that.
Nope. Well, now that we've ranted about that for a little bit, and we're about an hour into this, Neal, maybe we should just kind of switch, you know, over to goods, bads, and others, and kind of talk about our life a little bit here.
All right.
What's good in your life, man?
My good. I'm going to switch it right back to politics. My good is that there were a Republican and a Democrat allied and submitted a piece of legislation. So Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey. Massey's from Kentucky, Khanna's from California. They have the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and holy crap, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is on this side. Like it's strange bedfellows, but like let's take bipartisanship wherever we can get it. That's my good. My bad is that, you know, the Department of Defense, Trump is saying he's going to rename it to the Department of War. I don't get it. None of my buddies get it. I am, you know, I think if you think about what like message he's trying to send here, it's all wrong. I think we as a society have agreed a long time ago that we're going to be the good guys. So like, I think this is going to happen. I don't think he's going to back off of it, but I just think it's the wrong direction. My other is actually, again, kind of tied to what we talked about before. I'm waiting to see what the Supreme Court does. I have more faith in it than you do, I guess. I don't know John Roberts. I'm not going to claim like I've gotten into his head, but I've read enough of his opinions and his writings to think that his intent is institutional, which is to say to uphold the court and the court's standing. He's got a different view of what the court should be doing than I think most. But and what I mean by that is, again, he really believes in a strong executive and that the court is a check. But man, it does feel a lot like he's given a lot of ground. The thesis is that maybe he's saving his powder for when he really needs it. But that's my other. I want to keep an eye on that and see how it goes.
I'd be curious what scenario he thinks he's saving his powder for. You know, like what is the line that you won't cross here, Johnny?
Johnny. No, my answer to that is in part sort of the case I laid out earlier, which is I think the administration is setting up a scenario where there's going to be some junior and mid-level officers that are going to have to decide what's legal and illegal. That's going to lead to conflict and fighting. And the second example would be your elections example of congressmen not being seated. I think those are the two, like, think about where the real backstops are for democracy. What's going to make the institution hold or not hold? It's when the Supreme Court says something and the executive ignores it. The Andrew Jackson example you cited before. The things that have been decided so far, yeah, like they let them use the Alien Enemies Act, which I think was a little preposterous. But okay, they've given him a bunch of shadow docket victories, like not that's certainly distasteful, but not institution breaking. The answer to your question is like he's holding his powder for those moments where the institution could be broken.
Yeah, but Trump and all of his cronies have shown that they don't actually typically go. January 6th was the Reichstag fire equivalent, right? Which is they trade for the big bold thing, and it failed, and the institutions kind of held them back, but they regathered and they recognized that what you do is you don't break the camel's back, with one blow. You just keep piling things on until all of a sudden the institutions are broken. And Justice Roberts, Johnny, Chief Justice Roberts, I think is being willfully ignorant to notice that the legal system, the thing that he is directly responsible for, is breaking under a million straws right now of illegality that he has not only looked at it the other way, but actually empowered. Department of War is just one example. That is illegal. Congress set the name of the Department of Defense. It's been that way for decades. It's in all sorts of law. It's illegal. It is fucking illegal. Like I know it's a small sort of thing here. And there's an irony, the disgusting irony in a draft dodger naming, the Department of War. But even if you want to move around the opprobrium of it, it's just fucking illegal. It's against the law, and everybody that's doing it is that is like in the Department of Defense, because I'm not going to call it the Department of War. Everybody in the Department of Defense that is trying to change everything to being the name of the Department of War is complicit in breaking the law. They are accomplices in law breaking. I know we won't hold any of them to account, but every one of them too, that's breaking the law. It is technically an illegal order. Not nearly the importance of an illegal order to invade Chicago, but it's still an illegal order. It's illegal, and that's just the law. And Chief Justice Roberts is empowering that. So, well, I wanted to, for my good, I ended up meeting with my daughter's teacher the other day at kind of an open house, and she's just an incredibly bright child. She ended up winning as a fourth grader, she won the math competition for the entire school that goes up to 5th and 6th grade. Last year, she's a 5th grader this year. Yeah, just very, very smart. And towards the end of last year, she was talking about how she was kind of getting bored. And I was a little concerned because she had one more year in elementary school. And I was like, what are we going to be doing here? Ended up meeting the guy. There was just a little bit of a mindset shift for Ellen because it turns out he's got like a lot of really advanced kind of language and mathematics sort of stuff that she could be doing. Representations of like the quadratic equation, for example. She could be starting to do that, operating in different bases in mathematics, like just some pretty advanced stuff. And she just needed kind of a little encouragement from home to go tackle the sort of things he was suggesting, because there's some really advanced stuff there. But the word he kept using was the way that she thinks fascinates him. And it was at like at a back to school night, and it got a little uncomfortable because I'm a little proud, but also a little uncomfortable because he kept talking about my kid, and nobody wasn't talking about other people's kids. So I like to say that I'm glad that I had her second, because I would have been an insufferable parent if I'd had her first, because she just makes you look like a great parent in so many ways. Anyways,
take credit for it, man.
A little bit. It's mostly my wife's side of the gene pool, I think, that does that. But but man, she's a smart kid, and she's so fun to be around. I love her to pieces.
That's awesome. Awesome, man.
My bad is reporting out of the Times of London is about about several dozen Russian dissidents that had come to the United States for legal protection from prosecution from another authoritarian in the world, Putin. Were not only were they jailed, they were returned back to Russia, and not only were they returned back to Russia, they were illegally sent back with their interview stuff from immigration authorities. So essentially, we gave up people that came to the United States for protection from abuse, and gave their abusers all that they needed in order to go after them. There were literally several hundred people that were involved in that. Every one of those, that was an illegal order. If we're not willing to stand for that, I don't know what we're doing anymore. And then for me, the thing that I'm tracking here continues to be the National Guard. I want to see that lieutenant. I'm waiting for you. I don't know what, your name is. I can't wait to tell everybody like that you're finally the person that spoke up in the position to be able to do it. I'll admit, it's one thing for me, an old, retired, cranky, fat guy, to be talking about like what I would want to be doing if I were in that scenario. You're the man or woman in the arena, and we need a champion, and I'm looking for you. So I hope my faith in the power of the Constitution and of those that swear the oath to the Constitution holds, because right now it's pretty heavily tested.
Yes, it is.
Well, on that ray of sunshine, that's it for this episode of Hardpoints. Thanks for listening and for being part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup world. If you found today's episode useful or thought-provoking, please make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And please, if you can, share it on social media or send it to someone who would appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. Hardpoints is produced by Jordan Garuso and brought to you by the Valor Media Network. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.